Welcome to episode 5 of the Wise-Mind Fireside Chats, which, as you probably know by now, is an abbreviation of Wise-Mind Fireside Chats. Joined once again by Erika, Gabby, Melanie, Brett and Julian, and this time our conversation is going to go in the direction of the traps that we create for ourselves in life. These often show up for us in limiting beliefs. They show up for us in all kinds of roadblocks to growth and development. So I'm going to start off by asking if any of our members have experienced traps, and more importantly, how did they recognize that they had been caught in a trap? What did they do to break free of it? And I'm going to come to Julian to start the conversation.
Well, I've spot myself in many traps. And it's gonna be hard to summarize them in one or two sentences, but I can talk about that for hours, I think. But a big thing I see in myself, and I try to be really aware of this one, and I saw many people falling in that trap, is confirmation bias. You know, like sometimes when you try avoiding responsibility, you will see perspective and try to bend reality to don't take the responsibility in your story. Or if you think like, oh, this partnership is not going to work because just one day you were in a bad mood, then you start to develop that belief and you're going to sabotage the relationship just to confirm that instead of looking at, oh, where I can improve here. So I think like, yeah, confirmation bias it's a big trap.
Absolutely. Melanie, it looks like you've got something on your mind.
Yeah, I think for me, mine was catastrophizing. I could have, I could have got gold medals in that area. So very much focusing on the worst case scenario. And I'll give you guys an example, something that is about 5-6 years ago that happened. And I'd recently separated, so I'm suddenly a single mom, trying to keep down a job and look after 2 kids, keep a roof over my head. So money was very, very tight. I'm living in a foreign country, very little support network, and my car had to go in for an MOT. So like I booked the MOT and literally I had the money to pay for the MOT and that was it. Yeah. I didn't have any other spare cash. And so for like 3 days until the MOT appointment arrived, I was just getting myself in this like real state, like, what if it doesn't pass? What if there's something wrong with the car? If there's anything wrong with it, I don't have the money to pay with it. And if I don't have a car, how am I going to get to work? I'm going to lose my job. If I lose my job, I can't pay my rent. If I can't pay my rent, then, they're going to take my kids away from me. So I'd made up this story in my head that, I was going to end up homeless on the streets and my children were going to be taken into care just because I was worried about the outcome of this MOT. So the day comes, I take my car to the MOT test station and I'm sitting there nervously waiting. It seemed like forever. It was probably like 20 minutes. I'm waiting for the guy to come with the result. And he comes, hands me the registration documents, and he said, "Oh, go and pay on your way out. Your car's passed." And I went to him, "Are you sure?" I was so nervous and so like I'd made up my mind that it was going to fail. That was the story I told myself. And like, so I actually said to him, "Are you sure?" And he kind of looked at me like, "Why, is there something wrong that is there something that's wrong with it?" Oh, no, it's fine. Thank you very much. But I got myself in such a state over something so stupid. And as I say, I was just moved into a new neighborhood. I didn't really feel I knew anybody that well. And a few weeks later, I actually told this story to one of my new neighbors. And that's an English couple that lived close by to me. And she was straight away, she said, "We have 3 cars. We're 2 people. Like, if you'd have said, even if the car hadn't have passed, we would have given you a car." It's like, so, the solutions were there. It was never going to come to that. But, sometimes, these stories we tell ourselves, we believe them and they're just stories. So that was an experience that taught me that, whenever now I'm having these kind of negative thoughts and I'm maybe looking on that, worst case scenario, I can ground myself and start actually getting some logic back. How likely is that worst case scenario? Yeah, what is the best case scenario? What are other options that could pan out? So that to me was actually a really good lesson. So I'm actually getting past that problem. So
It's a
like,
great example. Sorry, Gabby, go on.
no, I was just going to say it's great what Melanie and Julien said, because whatever we're telling ourselves and whatever limiting beliefs we create ourselves and the stories we tell ourselves, the reason why they get us into a trap is because if we don't have to do it, like the car had to be brought there, but if it's something which we're not forced to do, we're holding ourselves back and trap ourselves, because then we don't do it in the first place. Right? We actually stop doing things, and if we don't do things, we get stuck in a situation and we will not be able to get out of there.
It just reminded me of, our old familiar, I'm going to paraphrase, but, the problem isn't the problem. It's how you think about the problem is the problem 99% of the time. So that's what that story Melanie just shared reminded me of. It's like, the problem isn't going to the automotive shop. The problem is how I'm thinking about what's going to happen at this shop, really, is what the problem is. Our thinking is usually the problem in most events.
Yeah, I think sometimes we're more focused on the problem than the solution. So if we just twist it around and start actually thinking, well, what are the solutions? What other options do I have here? Very often the problem can just dissolve and go away.
It's funny. It's how you spend your time, or how I spend my time, right? In our head. And this part starts driving us and taking us down this pathway where we could be doing so many other things, right? But we get stuck, or I get stuck on those thoughts. And if I stay focused on the positive, like the reality is, if I run into a problem, can I solve it? Can I reach out to somebody else and ask for some help and support to solve my problem, like some advice? Or yeah. So why am I sitting with these thoughts and allowing them to drive these different feelings and then disrupt what's going on in my body, right? And there's like an old program or something that would be behind it that's really interesting. Where looking at it, where it would take me, those are probably the things for me to look at, in how do I shift those old patterns so that when they show up now, right? Because it's not really those feelings now in that event. It's more about, whatever it was in the past. So yeah, there's looking back on that I feel could be wasting your time too, right? Instead, just taking control. Once you realize what it is, take control and then shift that pattern. So
You mentioned there the amount of mental energy, the mental capacity that goes into worrying about these things. Imagine that exponentially, because we probably do this with everything that comes up. We catastrophize, we find the biases, those less than consciously programmed biases that Julien was referring to, that have shown us that our fears have actually come true in the past. And Melanie gave us a great tool there: best case scenario, worst case scenario, and actually what's the most likely. And Neil Donald Walsh, I think his name is, who wrote Conversations with God, part of that story, or those stories, is how he came to be destitute and on the street, but open to these incredible conversations. And Melanie showed us that had she asked, as Brett just sort of elucidated for us, there would have been a solution. But even had she ended up completely out of her comfort zone on the street, not even able to live out of the car because the car's impounded somewhere, something would have happened. And it would have all depended on how she chose to respond to it And like Erika said, paraphrasing Virginia Satir, it's not the way we think of, it's not the problem, it's the way we think about the problem.
And this reminds me of, there's a book called Everything is Figure-Outable by Marie Forleo. And it's basically on this same topic, right? Like no matter what it is that you are, what adversity comes your way, big, small, whatever, somewhere in between, there is always a solution. Everything can always be figured out. So if you approach anything that you're going through in life, or any big task that's coming up, or any nerve-wracking event, knowing with that in your mind, whatever it is, I'm going to be able to figure it out if it doesn't go the way that I'm hoping for, right? So it reminds me of our last recording and having the growth mindset. That's all tied together. Like a growth mindset is thinking, I can figure this out, or at least I can learn how to figure it out. And if I can't, I'm going to figure out who can help me to figure this out. That's all connected. So it all kind of, not surprisingly, ties together. I'm not surprised that one conversation is leading into the next. For me, traps, as I'm sitting here listening to all you guys, my personal trap is a little slightly different than all of this. Mine comes more in the overachieving kind of trap, right? Like taking on more than might be possible, or, you know, having higher aspirations than might be feasible to do. And it's sort of like an underlying and a low, you know, low key under the surface sort of trap, I think, that I've developed, taking on more, which then just inevitably puts you in a place of overwhelm and then feeling like you can't accomplish anything, right? So it's figuring out, again, back to our last recording, what's most important and what do I really want to connect to? And even if that means more than what I can do, if my drive and my why is leading the way, it can be done, right? It's when you're taking on too much of things that you're really not interested in, that you lead yourself to overwhelm. That's a trap for me. That sometimes shows its head.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that sometimes I think we just need to remind ourselves that whatever life has thrown at us up till now, we've survived it because we're all here. And I know just us in this group, I'm sure life has thrown a lot at us. And we've got through it. We've found those solutions and we've survived it. So I think sometimes it's just a case of reminding ourselves of that fact. You know, whatever comes up, there's a solution. We can get through it.
Survived 100% of your worst days, right?
Yeah, we've survived. We're still here. We're still here.
We're still here.
Yeah, and that ties in nicely, because I think the biggest trap of all of them is that we sit back and think we're the only ones having the problems. It's only me has the problem. And you hear it sometimes. Why is this always happening to me? Right? Everybody else has a Facebook happy life, right? It's only always happening to me. Nobody else has the problem. And we don't even talk about it, and we don't look for help. As Melanie lovely even described in her little story, we don't look for support. We think we all have to figure it out ourselves. And that can become really overwhelming. So looking for support, having a support network is actually really, really important to face any adversity in life, to be able to lean on someone. And sometimes it's not so much leaning. Sometimes it's just having somebody to sit there and listen. They don't even have to say anything. Just being able to voice what we're afraid of, because if we talk it out loud to somebody, sometimes you start thinking yourself, well, why am I even thinking this? This sounds ridiculous. Why am I going down this rabbit hole? Why am I going down that spiral? Right? So I think to be able to step out and say, look, I'm worried about this, and talk to someone, but then why don't we choose that? Because sometimes you have the feeling we have to be seen as perfect. We have to be seen, we have it all together. I cannot say, oh, I feel weak here, or, you know. So I think that sometimes comes in as a trap as well.
I agree. Not asking for help is definitely a trap. Not being able to recognize when you need it, and not being able to ask for it because of what you think it means about it's saying about you. Like that is definitely a limiting belief led trap for sure.
And as the saying goes, a problem shared is a problem halved. So coming around for some closing thoughts then on traps, how we recognize them, how we deal with them. Julien, I'll come back to you.
Well, I think to awareness come first, like to witness what we're doing and how we get there. Then taking responsibility could be like second step. What can we do about it? There is sometimes certain stuff that is not on our own, and some stuff that's our responsibility. So taking our responsibility, and after that, I think like setting our intention and action align with who we are. That's if I have to phrase a process quickly, how to escape from it. That's how I do it.
Perfect. Brett.
Yeah. I think it's the feeling within my body when I'm starting to doubt and I'm feeling off. Like there's a big piece right there as I start to feel it in my body. When that's going on, it's like, all right, stop for a second. What is going on? Where am I and what am I doing? Right. And then I can self-examine the situation that I'm in and then actually troubleshoot that rather than staying focused on whatever is taking longer than it should be because of whatever pattern I'm in or with thought pattern. So yeah, the feelings within the body, I tend to go off of.
Yeah. Melanie, closing thoughts from you.
Yeah, I agree. I think awareness is the first step. Being that self-aware as soon as you get those kind of feelings, that resistance or whatever's going on. And I think it's looking at choices, but being very aware that doing nothing is also a choice. Because I think when we get to that point where we're feeling a little bit overwhelmed or I'm not quite sure what to do, we do nothing. And so we need to question ourselves, why am I choosing to do nothing? And I think that can often open up new doors and lead us down another path.
Absolutely. And procrastination is another one of those massive traps that people spend, and I'm going to use a canism here, anything up to a lifetime battling. Gabby, closing thoughts, please.
All of the above. And also when we speak about other traps, what we also could talk about is actually core values. When we don't realize that our core values have changed and we get trapped in a situation trying to do what we think we have to do, but not realizing life for us has changed. That's another really important one. And even things like, are we following cultural rules who don't even align with our core values? I have to go to university, I have to do this and have to do that because that's what's valued right now. And we want to be a valuable person. So we do that, but we get ourselves into debts up to our neck. And here we are, our core value might be freedom. And we feel like we're tied down like a modern day slave by having debts to the banks, right? So there's tons of traps we can fall into. And I think everybody says it. It's the self-awareness of what we want, who we are, which actually identifies what traps us. And it can be so many different things. So I think the first step is to realize when we feel stuck, to become self-aware, what actually is it which makes us feel trapped?
Great thought. Erika, why don't you give us your closing thought and then actually wrap up this episode for us?
So I feel like Gabby was just speaking directly to me, but I always feel like that when people are talking about freedom and choice and modern day slavery. But anyway, that's a side note. As far as traps go, I mean, ditto what everybody said. I really think it's self-awareness is key. You have to know thyself. You have to know when you're feeling it in your body is the first signal, right? You're feeling frazzled and stressed and nothing is in flow. For me, the word is flow, right? If I'm not feeling in flow, I know something is out of balance and I might want to take a look. But for me, I rely a lot, not that I'm reliant on it, but I value those trusted friends and people closest to me who might see something and notice my blind spot. I might not see it. And they're telling me, why are you doing that? You're doing this, whatever. I'll stop and take a look at that. And because I value what they're telling me, that maybe I'm missing something here about a trap that I'm putting myself into. So, but Alec, what is your takeaway note on this? You want me to wrap up the recording, but I didn't hear what you had to say about our final note here. So then you can wrap it up.
I knew that was coming. Very subtly done, but predictable. What is it Monty Python say? Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. In relation to my closing thoughts, I would say, and my personal motto, self-awareness precedes inner strength and personal resilience. If we are able to look at something from that wise mind space and see the broader picture, take into account the counsel of our wise friends, and really recognize the situation that we've put ourselves in, we have within us, as Carl Rogers would say, all of the material that is required to create and promote the life that we want. So self-awareness precedes absolutely everything. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in to this. I've forgotten whether it was the 4th or the 5th episode now. 5th episode, thank you, of the Wise Mind Fireside Chats. You will be able to find the contact details for all our conversationalists in the blurb on the channel. And we will be joining you again in the not too distant future for a conversation about how do we turn a rant into a rave. Now, if you remember the 90s in the UK, then raving was a completely different topic to what we're going to cover. But hopefully that's a little bit of a baiting of the water to draw you in. So from all of us, for now, cheerio.